Hello, welcome to the Wandering Drew. I am Drew. Today I will be discussing the Oceans to Lake Trail and some of the preparations I did for this hike. Stay tuned as I explain some of the research and planning I did for this hike. Welcome back. I have been looking at doing the Oceans to Lake Trail for several months. Since I first learned of this trail, I had decided to hike this very unique trail. I have been told that this trail encompasses all the types of terrain that you would encounter while doing the complete Florida Trail, but it manages to do all that in only 63 miles. The Oceans to Lake Trail is considered part of the Florida Trail, but in reality, it's a side spur of that trail. And no one that would be doing a through hike would normally complete the Oceans to Lake Trail, as it doesn't lead back to the main line of the Florida Trail. The Florida Trail is a little different and unique when it comes to long distance trails, in that there are several options for a hiker to choose from while they're completing it. And all these options are considered acceptable. One of the locations where a hiker has to make a choice of which part of the trail he's going to follow is when you come to Lake Okeechobee. The trail splits to follow Lake Okeechobee, and there are two paths. One is on the east side and one is on the west side. Both are considered part of the official trail, and choosing one doesn't take away from the hike. However, just like later on, when a hiker comes to Orlando and is faced with the same choice of going on the eastern spur or western spur of the Florida Trail to circle around Orlando, each side of the trail, the east and the west side, has a different but unique experience to the other. Some have more resupply points or go through certain wetlands and points of interest, and some of them have more or less road walking, but they are each part of the official Florida Trail. The Oceans to Lake Trail is a newer portion of the Florida Trail, and if going northbound, as most hikers do, you go on the eastern spur of Lake Okeechobee, or the Big O, as it's sometimes called, at one point you will come to a junction with the Ocean to Lake Trail. And this takes place in Palm Beach County, Florida. And the trail, just like its name, leads from Lake Okeechobee, or the east side of Lake Okeechobee, and heads east toward the Atlantic Ocean. However, most people follow the course I just laid out, which is really more of a lakes to ocean trail, not the ocean to lakes trail. Very few people, and almost none of the journals I've ever followed, follow anyone doing the trail from the Atlantic Ocean to Lake Okeechobee. While it's called the Ocean to Lakes Trail, it really should be called the Lakes to Ocean Trail. My wife calls it the Swamp to Shore Trail, and every time I mention doing this trail or Ocean to Lakes, she usually asks me, is that the Swamp to Shore Trail? So unofficially, it's become known as the Swamp to Shore Trail in my household. The Oceans to Lake Trail travels for 63 miles and goes through 4 distinct areas or regions. So these 4 areas are all unique and different, and they all are under government oversight. Some of the uniqueness of this trail is that you will be traveling in marshy or swampy areas that could be flooded or could be dry as could be. And the water may range from small puddles to waist deep, depending on the time of year you go and what the recent rainfall has been. The trail also has several newer sections from when it was first created that have rerouted due to more available lands that avoid walking on levees or roads, to areas that have been moved due to mitigating erosion. There are still several portions of this trail that are along roads or canal banks. This trail has nothing near the support network that a longer trail may have, or something like the Appalachian Trail. There are no resupply areas along the trail. There is possibly one area that you cross a main road, and if you wish to leave the trail, you can go and get some supplies at a convenience store, or possibly pick up food and then continue along the trail. But being that this trail is only 63 miles, resupplying is really not usually an option or a necessity, as most people can finish this trail easily in 4 to 6 days. 5 to 6 days really being the norm. There are some people that have done it shorter. There are some people and groups that can finish it in 3 days with a push for heavy miles, doing 21 miles each day, thereabouts. But the average person tends to finish this in about 5 days. This trail, being located in South Florida, the terrain is fairly level with little change in elevation. Unfortunately, water supply points are limited along this trail, but I'll discuss those. The best time to complete this trail is anywhere from December to about March, and this is for several reasons. It avoids the extremely hot weather during the summer. It also hopefully avoids the prime season for most of the bugs, especially mosquitoes, especially as we get later into February or March, where there's probably been a cold snap when a lot of the mosquitoes have died off. It's also the least rainy season, so therefore the trail should be as dry as possible, or you don't have to contend with the mosquitoes and the flooding. Going a little bit later than March or April, you run into some issues. Obviously it starts to rain, and that becomes an issue. The temperatures begin to get warmer, and that's a concern. Additionally, you have to worry about mating season for gators, and they become more aggressive and territorial then. So there's an advantage to going generally around the late January, February mark, since that is usually the best time of the year to go. However, during that time period, the weather is really an unknown. It can be extremely hot, or it can be cold. Cold doesn't usually last in South Florida, but it does drop down to cold weather, and it's possible to get low temperatures. It will still be very hot during the day. Even with a cold snap coming through, you usually only get a break for a day or two. The cold front doesn't usually last long down in Florida. Average temperatures in Florida during this time run in the mid-70s, and the lows usually in the 55 range. This is still good camping weather at night. The Ocean to Lake Trail is maintained by the Loxahatchee chapter of the Florida Trail. That group is one of 19 groups throughout the state of Florida that help maintain the Florida Trail as a whole. Each one of the chapters has a portion of the Florida Trail that they are responsible for. There is information and resources available to you about the Ocean to Lake Trail on the Loxahatchee chapter's website, which I will include a link in the show notes. One of the resources that are available is the availability of a printable map. Most useful are 2 documents that are on the website. The first lists the trail by mileage with key features, including known water points, roads, and camping sites, and just general points of interest along the way that can help you track where you're going. Another page lists all the management areas that you cross over and how to contact the controlling authority. The Florida Trail Association sells a map of the Ocean to Lake Trail, which I purchased. It's this map right here. There are notations on it that link to a guidebook that they also sell, and that can be useful to you in your planning purposes. I will be taking this map with me on the trail as a backup, since it's paper. Don't have to worry about it not working. However, for this trail, I purchased a electronic guidebook my first gut hook guides for this trail. It is part of the Florida Trail maps that Gut Hooks has on their website, and you are able to just purchase the Ocean to Lake Trail for a very small fee. I think it was like $5 or $6, or maybe even less. And I find that to be very useful, and I will use that as my primary source of navigation, depending on how good or bad the trail is marked. They should have just completed maintenance over the last several weeks, so I'm expecting the markings and signage to be fairly good along this trail. As I mentioned before, the majority of the Ocean to Lake Trail is a government resource. They manage it and oversee it. Therefore, there are several restrictions. Campsites are spaced throughout the trail, but are not always at a mileage that you would like them to be. So you need to take some planning in doing your trip so that you can camp at a known campsite. No stealth camping is allowed. Additionally, at several of the campsites, permits are required. However, for the majority of the trail, those permits are free. They just require a notification to the controlling authority who grant you permission to use the site. Some of them are first come, first serve. Some of them, the permit gives you the ability to use the campsite. There are rangers and law enforcement officials that patrol this area, and they have been known to stop hikers and check with them if they have a permit to use the site. Additionally, fires are not allowed in several portions, and fines can be pretty hefty if you are caught making a ground fire in the wrong area. And once again, on the Loxahatchee chapter website, you'll see a list of all the controlling authorities and contact numbers for them, as well as which campsites are contained within that area and who you need to contact in order to utilize them. As I mentioned, in several places, no ground fires are permitted, so you need to bring a stove if you're planning on cooking. Additionally, as always, you should follow leave no trace principles and clean up after yourself, and if possible, even clean up after others that weren't so kind. So remember, if you pack it in, pack it out. I mentioned water earlier, and this is an area of conflicting information. There are several pumps along the way, hand pumps, that you can get water from, but they're labeled non-potable, so all your water needs to be filtered. Additionally, while you're surrounded by water in a lot of places, the water is going to be very brackish and definitely needs to be filtered. It will not be clean or clear. The water in most places will be brackish or like a dark tea due to all the tannins in the water. The pumps are intermittently, depending on who you check and what site, reported as working or not working due to failed seals, sometimes vandalism, or people not using them correctly. All these pumps need to be primed with water before you can get them to work. So hopefully someone has been courteous enough to leave a pail of water next to it so that you can prime the pump and then use it, which you should then refill the pail so that the next person can prime the pump and use it as well. So these pumps frequently go down, and you're using well water, which is not potable and needs to be filtered. Additionally, most of the canals and some of the areas are runoff areas for farms, so you need to be careful about what you're drinking, and it's unknown how many and what chemicals could be in these areas. The best thing is to bring water. However, over a 4 or 5 day trip, that's not always feasible, and obviously taking some water from sources that are out there may become a necessity. I'm planning on carrying extra water, but I realize that at some point I'm probably going to need to filter water from some sort of canal or water area. You need to be careful because, as I mentioned before, there are gators in the area. You don't want to look like a food source for them by leaning over a canal, especially in the early morning or late evening hours where all they see is your shadow and they come up and try and take a bite out of you. That doesn't sound very fun. So more than likely I'll probably be using an alternate way of retrieving my water, like a bottle with a string on it that I can throw in, let it sink a little bit and fill up, and then pull my water that way. Might not, it might take a little longer, but it sounds a little safer to me. Depending on the source and where it's at, I'll be using that method if in fact I don't feel it's safe to get water otherwise. But the majority of places, you don't need to worry about the gators. I've been told that both snakes and the gators move out of your way if you're approaching in areas where it's flooded. I'm hoping those people are right. The only place with a possible resupply is at Indian Town Road, which is roughly when you're about 3/4 of the way done with the trail. At that point, I might possibly leave the trail just to go grab some water, probably not food, but that'll be a decision I'll make with the group that I'm with. Another excellent source about this trail, and in preparation and planning and actually hiking it, is a website maintained by another hiker called Jupiter Hikes. I'm giving him a generous plug because he deserves it for the effort and the work that he's put in to describing this trail. And I will put a link to his website in the show notes as well. And I would have to say that his webpage describing the Ocean Lake Trail is probably the most comprehensive one out there, and is a definite resource for anyone looking to do this trail. Equipment wise for this trip, I purchased gaiters. And if you're not familiar with gaiters, they're basically coverings that go over your shoe to keep out debris like rocks, scree, little twigs, and things like that. And I bought the ones that match my shoes, and these shoes are what I used on the Foothills Trail. So they're a little bit tight, but being that there's no elevation change, I'm not anticipating any problem with the toe box like I had on the Foothills Trail with the Scents. I realize that I'll be going in and out of water most likely during several portions of the trail, so I want the mesh in the front which allows the water to escape and not become trapped in my shoe. And I figure between the shoe and my socks being wet and my feet being wet, it is a concern. So I'll be looking to take care of my feet at least as much as I do on other trails, if not more. And if those sneakers or shoes get really bad after the hike with the water and the muck, I'll just throw them away. Additionally, for this hike, I'll be using long pants for cover and protection from brush, bugs, and the sun, as well as a long sleeve shirt, most likely, for the same reason. Being that there are several portions that are out in the sun and without cover in the area, the sun will be an issue, and I'll have to protect against sunburn. So that includes using sunscreen. So I'll be using a hat, I'll be using a buff, which I frequently use to cover my neck and throat area, sunscreen on any area that's not covered, a long sleeve shirt, although I may go to a lighter color because I'm afraid this might be a little bit too hot, my underwear, and long pants, as I already said. And these are Black Diamond pants. The only other clothes I'm going to bring is for nighttime use to get into my sleeping bag, to let these dry out a little bit and air out, and hopefully keep my sleeping bag clean. In addition to my shoes and the gaiters I'll be using, I'm going to be taking my trekking poles that I normally bring, and I also use these as poles for the tent that I use. So the majority of the equipment that I'm bringing is similar to what I've brought on other trips. The only change to my equipment that I'm bringing is generally the new camera, which I'm filming this episode on, and some support equipment for video taking, which I usually don't bring because I haven't had this camera. So I'll be bringing spare batteries. I'm going to actually bring a lav mic and a way to charge some of those batteries additionally while I'm hiking. On this trip, I won't be traveling by myself. I'm going with the son of one of my family friends, who also is friends with my son, and two of his friends. So in the beginning of the trail, there'll be 4 of us, and my son will be joining us most likely after 2 days due to a prior commitment. And then I'm hoping that we'll finish as the 5 people. And we've committed to doing the trail in 4 days due to commitments at work that the other people have. They need to return back to work by a certain date. So we have kind of committed ourselves to doing mileage each day of 15 miles for the first 3 days, and the last day doing approximately 20 miles. So while I think that mileage is very doable. There is some concern about doing it, and the last day we really need to push out those miles and get an early start to finish at a reasonable time in order to get picked up and make it back home so that these people can go to work the next day. Finishing at 9 or 10 o'clock at night would really not be good. Hope you've enjoyed this. If you feel so inclined, please subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on either the trail, the planning, some of my equipment choices. If you have anything to lend to the discussion, that'd be great. Hit the like button if you enjoy this and you like what I'm doing. And I appreciate you taking time out to watch this video. Till we meet again. Send a text out in an emergency. I can get me help.